Phoenix Rising by Michael Anastas. Ash staggered to his feet, using his sword to keep him up. Had he really seen me make a wish of the wraiths? He didn't know. What he did know was that the wraith and his 4 minions were nowhere to be found. "Is everyone still alive?" he asked weakly. "We're okay," said Dragon as he staggered to his feet. "Everyone else?" "We're all okay," choked Freeman as he fell back against the wall. Merlin staggered up to one knee and then collapsed, using his sword to keep him from falling back down. "Michael, he wished to become a Ninetails," said Freeman. "Why?" "Because Faith asked them to become human," replied Dragon. "Michael's revenge." "Ugh!" Merlin fell back down to the floor. The minions! They ran after him, out the door." "I would have figured that," said Ash. "But where did they go?" Dragon crossed his arms, but didn't smile like he usually did. "The Temple of the Phoenix is right across the street from here." All eyes turned on him. "What? Am I the only one that can read Arabic here?" Merlin held up his sword. "Can you use this?" Dragon shrugged his shoulders. "I know how to do it, but I'm sorry. I can't use a sword to save my life." "Forget it," said Ash. "I'll go." Gary Oak gave the doors one good kick, sending them falling to the ground, and walked in, sword drawn, followed closely behind by Durai and Bible. There, they saw Faith and I, standing on opposite sides of the altar, holding the Pokeball over the altar. "May the world be filled with light," I said with a smile. "So that all may see the Phoenix's might," continued Faith. We gently brought the Pokeball down into place. "No!" shouted Gary, his voice echoing through the temple. "I won't allow it!" The other 2 minions drew their swords. "Keep your guard!" Durai and Bible turned to the voice that spoke, and Ash wove his sword through the air in a fury. The minions fell to the ground, their clothes stained with blood. Gary turned around in surprise, held his sword before him, but then his expression changed gravely. "Your goddess is coming," he said sullenly. "This city shall surely not survive it." The Pokeball connected with the altar, and we stepped back and watched the lights from the Pokeballs snake around the ceiling, where they gathered into one rainbow-like cluster at the center before shooting down into the Pokeball. The ball snapped open, and the temple was filled with gold light. The remaining 10 members of Ragnarok struggled to their feet and stumbled down the steps of the Wraith's temple, some leaving bloody trails behind them, and stared in awe at the temple across the street. Bystanders pointed at them and their vibrant uniforms, but their gazes all turned to the temple as the light filled the temple and shone out into the street. "She's coming," said Freeman. "Huh?" said Misty. "What do you mean?" "The Phoenix," he said sullenly. "She's coming." Out of the light, Gary Oak ran in haste, skipping 2 steps at a time, followed closely by his long-since rival. "The Phoenix is coming!" he shouted at the crowd. "Sinners, run for your lives!" But nobody ran. They only understood the word Phoenix, and at the sound of it, praised the skies and got down on their knees before the steps, praising the light that shone from the temple, engulfing Ash and Gary and proceeding onto those at the front row. Though they could not be seen, it was clear that Gary was screaming bloody murder. And then, all at once, the temple's walls exploded outward, and the roof was engulfed in a flame that rose from the ground. "Mitch Vu Ta Phoenix!" the men shouted, raising their hands to the sky. The flames leapt higher and broke through the clouds, and when they faded, there, atop the remnants of the temple, a bird glowing with the brightest gold rose to the sky. 2 Ninetails, one wearing a slightly torn Ragnarok uniform, stood at her left and right. This was the Phoenix, the very legend we, the Phoenix trainers, had been named after. She was nothing like the Ho-Oh they had seen so long ago. She was a living wonder, a marvel of nature and heaven. They cowered in fear. "I have long awaited your arrival," laughed a deep voice that echoed through the sky and in the minds of all who stood witness. And there, before the temple, the Wraith appeared. The townsfolk pointed at the Wraith and screamed in terror, and all but the bravest of men fled for their lives. "Come," said a soothing feminine voice that echoed through their heads. "Let us settle this someplace else." With that, she took to the sky, and the Wraith followed after her. Ash and Gary ran up towards Merlin, who drew his sword at the sight. "Hold! I mean you no harm!" shouted Gary. Undoubtedly, you have heard the legend. The Phoenix and the Wraith are of equal power, and the only victims shall be those caught in the crossfire. Well, there shall be no winner, so it's possible that they may battle until the world crumbles. You have to prevent that! Merlin sheathed his sword. You're right, but what can we do against the Wraith? Fight, of course. If the Phoenix and Wraith are of equal power, you have the power to decide who wins or loses. He drew his sword and threw it on the ground. Don't worry, I shall not try to stop you. I may still have a demon in me, but even I know that this is not the way. He stepped back. Go. Your goddess is waiting for you. The Wraith and the Phoenix met in an aerial battle 10,000 feet above the city of Mecca. They sized up their competition and saw that they were both of equal power. There, the battle that Ragnarok had been created to prevent began. The first attack was blinding to my eyes, even as we watched from the ground. The Phoenix is winning, I proclaimed. I'm sure of it. Hold, said Faith. Do not celebrate until victory has been declared. It was then that I noticed the formation of Charizards and Dragonites take flight from the base of the temple. In shock, I leapt down from my seat and screamed out at them. Merlin Durai! You fool! Do not do anything to distract the Phoenix! She will overcome the Wraith if you stay back! Don't you understand? Her weakness is her love! I don't care! Merlin shouted back. This madness must come to an end! 10 minutes later, the gold light began to fade. The Wraith and the Phoenix had used their powers to the fullest and circled each other, pondering new strategies. Then the Wraith laughed. It appears that your children have come to your aid. The Phoenix turned its head to the Charizards and Dragonites behind her. Leave! It is not safe up here! We don't care for our safety! Shouted Ash as he drew his sword and stood up on the back of his Charizard. This is the battle Ragnarok was formed to prevent, said Merlin as he did the same. Now that we have failed, we must end it. The Wraith laughed. I wish my children were this loyal. He reached back and extended his hand, and a black wave of fire stretched out at the Phoenix. She dodged easily, and before it could strike the Ragnaroks behind her, she countered it with a gold flame. They didn't cancel each other out, rather they bounced off of each other. The gold flame flew upward, stretching out into space, but the black flame shot back down at Earth, where it struck the outskirts of Mecca, setting it ablaze. Stay back! She thundered, and the riders found it impossible to get any closer. This must end! Ash proclaimed. Fight it, Charizard! Fight it! Merlin pled to his Dragonite. Come on, just take us a little further, please! Suddenly, that rule of gravity that the Phoenix created no longer applied to those two, and they proceeded on into the battle. Then, they extended their wings before each other, and a huge wave of fire extended from both of them. Merlin could see it clearly by the way they were angled. They would miss each other. He wasn't sure about the gold flame, but it was clear that the Wraith would hit its target. And now, the finishing strike! Faith proclaimed. Lady Luck be with our goddess! I shouted out. The memory of what happened next shall haunt me for all eternity. As the waves of fire approached each other, Merlin leapt off the side of his Dragonite, directly into the paths of the oncoming blows. No, Faith whispered. He wouldn't! The gold wave struck the stone of Merlin's sword, and in that split second, he aimed it accordingly and fired it at the Wraith. The black wave, however, continued on, striking Merlin Durai with the fullest of its power. Time stopped in the air and on the ground. Ash stopped dead on the air that he flew in. The other riders no longer struggled to penetrate the Phoenix's shield. Faith and I watched in absolute horror from the ground. Even the Phoenix and the Wraith were in complete shock that Merlin had done such a thing. All he did was shield his eyes as the golden wave of fire approached and struck its true target. There was a flash of light, and the Wraith faded into nothing. But nobody was celebrating the victory. We all just watched in horror as Merlin Durai fell away from the battle. Hours later, Ash Ketchum flew back down to Mecca, searching for the body of Merlin Durai. Instead, he found Faith, crying onto my shoulder, still that of a Ninetales, both of us in each other's grasp. I'm sorry, I said through my tears. Phoenix, please, forgive us. The Phoenix never came down from the sky. To this day, her whereabouts are unknown.